So what I'll do is I will make a start, and then obviously anybody coming in, Sophie and Sian, who are on our team, are very kindly moderating for us today, so you can give them a little wave. You can see them up there. Esther Griffin, who's our head of clean tech here at and energy here at Content Comms, is next to me, which is why she's muted, so we're picking up her sound. There you go, via my screen. I'm Jo Watchman, I'm the MD at Content Comms, and Esther Griffin, as I say, is Head of Energy and Clean Tech. The topic for today, and thank you so much for giving us your time. We know that some of you know all about this, about us and what we're doing on Greenwash, and some of you less so. But the topic today is greenwashing and avoiding reputational risk. This is a presentation that is full of practical advice and guidance, and it's particularly aimed at people who are communicators, marketeers, people working in the manufacturing sectors, and anybody who makes things, anybody who's in the services and solutions businesses. We think greenwash is affecting all of our client base, and it's something where we as communicators have a responsibility to be more supportive to you about how things can be done better with greater transparency and authenticity from a communications and marketing perspective. So just to get some basics sorted, questions, if you'd be kind enough to put those into the Q&A function. You can use chat, but that's more open, but Sophie and Sian are going to pick those up. The session today is being recorded, and we hope that nobody has a big issue for that. We're going to aim for about 30 minutes here with some questions at the end of it. So just in case you're wondering if you can nip out to the canteen or whatever and go and grab your sandwiches, that's the sort of length of time. So we should be done within sort of 45 minutes or so. So again, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know Content Comms very well, or at all, we're a B Corp certified comms, content and marketing agency. We're based in the southwest of England, but our reach client-wise is across all of Northern Europe, and we specialise really in 3 core sectors, but supplemented with by manufacturing, energy, clean tech and built environment. And in 2023 we became B Corp certified. I know some businesses who are on this webinar today are also B Corp certified, but that's all about balancing purpose and profit. And part of our purpose as an agency is to use the skills that we have to help businesses do things with greater purpose and transparency and authenticity themselves. And we've taken the greenwash topic as something that we care very much about indeed. And 3 years ago, we produced the first edition of this little book, which we printed a few of as hard copy, but we've had about 1,000 downloads of the e-version. But this is the anti-greenwash playbook. And we did this actually to chime with the activities around COP26, the big climate change conference. We were invited up to a fringe event in Glasgow to present on it and to launch the book. But that little book has been a real framework for effective and clear communications around greenwash, which was becoming a real concern. We'll pick up on why in a minute, but a real concern around 2020, 2021, when some big data came out of the Competition and Markets Authority. And since then, we've really tried to champion this topic with our clients and friends. And we make all of our content freely available to the market so that we can help to educate everybody on how to do this without risk to their business. So that's a bit about us, and I want to kind of hand over to Esther, who's going to take the lion's share of this presentation. Then we'll kind of come back to me, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So Esther, over to you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. It's really lovely to see so many people sign up. Thanks for spending your lunch hour with us. So this is just a quick overview of what you're going to learn today in this hour, in this half an hour. So the rise of greenwashing and why it's a risk to you. The latest rules and regulations here and in Europe, and some real life case studies too that I can go through just to add a bit of context. And then finally, the how to avoid greenwashing yourself and communicate with authenticity. And I did just want to say that we're here to teach and not preach, because I do think greenwashing is quite a preachy topic, but we're still certainly learning as we go along. It's a minefield, and the reason we want to do this webinar is to help you, because there is rising scrutiny. In fact, recent research says that 40% of green claims could be misleading. So we're here to kind of help you navigate this new terrain. So what is greenwashing? Well, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term, and you'll see this definition that I've pulled out from Wikipedia. And I did just want to scratch out that word deceptively, because I expect that we've got some very responsible businesses on the call. In fact, I know we have, because we've got clients and friends of the company online, and a lot of greenwashing comes from a place of either misuse of language or a misunderstanding of how your claims could be interpreted, and a misunderstanding of the current regulations. So really, that was just to say that really that it's that probably more of us are doing it than we think. But certainly you're not alone, and there is a chance to do things in a different way. So why does it matter? Well, of course, there's the bigger kind of moral imperative around greenwashing, which is that it stops consumers from making responsible, informed decisions. And then in turn, of course, that can delay action on the climate crisis. But in terms of why it matters specifically to your business, and perhaps even your job, is that 60% of investors are worried about greenwashing, and there's a real consumer backlash too. So according to Deloitte, 33% of consumers stopped purchasing brands because of sustainability concerns. And you've probably seen that kind of trend is set to continue. So we're seeing a real generational shift. We've got the two youngest generations in the workplace, Gen Zs and millennials. A quarter of those generations have stopped or lessened a relationship with a business because of unsustainable practices in its supply chain. And then we have a lot of B2B companies on this webinar as well. And you'll have no doubt seen that there is an increased requirement now for perhaps your clients to be reporting their scope 3 emissions. And then in turn, you're probably feeling the pressure come down the supply chain in terms of what you report to them, and how transparent you are, and how you can explain your own environmental impact. And this is just a very quick plug to some research that we've done in-house on connecting with Gen Z. So this guidebook was written by my own Gen Z colleagues who are on the call, Sophie and Sean, and that is about how to communicate with this generation that has a very kind of increasing need for transparency and authenticity in the way that they do business. And of course, they are our future decision makers if they're not already. So it really is something of kind of business importance to think about. So there's a QR code there if you want to access that. So I wanted to go through the regulatory drive for transparency, because, as I said, it's set to tighten, and there are certain rules and regulations that if they're not in law, then they soon will be. So in 2021, the UK Competition and Markets Authority launched the Green Claims Code, and I'll talk more about the Competition and Markets Authority later, as well as the Green Claims Code. But these are specific guidelines on complying with consumer protection law when you're making green claims, and the guidelines apply to both B2C and B2B companies too. And then in 2023, the UK advertising regulator, the Advertising Standards Authority, updated its guidance on misleading environmental claims in advertising, with a specific focus on net zero and carbon neutral claims, because we know that they're very confusing to the average consumer. And then this one's a little bit more niche, but it's something for investment products, so that the Financial Conduct Authority just this year, 2024, launched some new sustainability disclosure requirements for investment products with a focus on anti-greenwashing. And then this is a big one. If you're a B2C business selling into the EU, you need to know about the EU Green Claims Directive. This is a really big one that will be coming into force in 2026 across the member states, that says that green claims must be clear, evidence-based and backed up by a third party. And I guess I would just say it doesn't pay to wait until 2026, because already individual companies within the EU already have their own sets of rules and regulations, particularly the more kind of advanced or forward-thinking countries. So it pays to check those out if there are particular markets that you're focused on. And then what's next? Well, we don't know, but it's certainly not going to get any easier, I think, for businesses to make unsubstantiated green claims, that's for sure. So just a quick focus then on those regulators that are specifically in the UK. We've got, just on the left-hand side there, we've got the Competition and Markets Authority, which is the competition regulator in the UK. And their job is, they've got a broad remit about stamping out practices that harm competitiveness, competition in the UK, and breach consumer protection laws. And they investigate greenwashing, and they've got the power to take enforcement action and give out fines. And they published the Green Claims Code, which I will get to. And you may have seen investigations that they've conducted in the news. So recently they conducted an investigation on fast fashion retailers. So I think it was George, Boohoo and Esther, about the way that they market their so-called sustainable products. And they also just closed an investigation into Worcester Bosch about the marketing of their hydrogen ready boilers, which run on a 20% blend of hydrogen. So they have a broad remit. And then you've also got the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, who work closely with the CMA, but their remit is specifically related to advertising. There's what's called a CAP code, Committee of Advertising Practice Code, which is the rule book for advertising and direct marketing. And I'm just going to focus a bit more on the ASA, because you might think, oh, well, we don't advertise, perhaps that doesn't apply to us, perhaps their rules don't apply, when in fact their jurisdiction covers more than traditional advertising. And a general rule of thumb is to ask yourself, is your content that you're creating for your business directly connected to the supply or transfer of goods and services? If so, then it may be under the ASA's remit. So that includes your website copy, any commercial emails that you send out, social media, and then any leaflets and brochures, any marketing collateral that you're putting out there. So it applies to all of us. It certainly applies to us as an agency in the work that we do, and it's highly likely to apply to you as well. So I wanted to put all of this into context and give you some case studies where adverts have been pulled from the ASA for breaching green claims rules. And this first one is PepsiCo. So for their Lipton brand, they just brought out a 100% recycled bottle, and they wanted to celebrate that with billboards across the UK. But what they put in very tiny small print was that while the bottle was made from recycled plastic, it excludes the cap and the label. And the ASA ruled that this advert was misleading because the average passerby would not be reading the very, very small print, and instead would assume from this advert that the entire product was 100% recycled. So that ad is no more. That one was banned. And then we've got HSBC here, and you may have seen this in the mainstream media because this was quite a high-profile case. But that advert on the left was banned because while it was completely accurate what HSBC said there, that they are making up to $1 trillion in financing available to help the net zero transition, they're also continuing to fine oil and gas companies to the tune of 65.3 million tonnes of carbon a year. So the ASA deemed that this advert was misleading because it omitted material information that would give the reader context as to HSBC's environmental advert impact. So you'll see there the advert on the right, which was which I saw at an Innovation Zero event, a Net Zero event in London. And clearly they've been advised to include some very giant small print at the bottom of that. So I don't know if you can see the man in the back there, but that small print was probably about half the size of me, and it states that we finance a number of industries that deal in fossil fuels. So clearly everyone's having to be very, very clear on their language these days. And then finally, I just wanted to include this one because it's not an advert, it's a tweet. And this company is not a household name. They're a relatively small artificial grass company in the south of England. And they were asked to take down this tweet because while they've stated there that the artificial grass is recyclable, it technically is, but there is no infrastructure in the UK that would allow you to do that. So it would be very complex and difficult for the average consumer to be able to recycle this product, so that they'd have to probably send it internationally. And then the ASA took issue with the fact that it was called eco grass when artificial grass isn't inherently eco at all, that certainly the manufacture of it is not eco-friendly, and neither is the displacement of soil and grass. So so they've actually changed the name of that product now. So there you go, that's just a snapshot. If you want to see more cases like that, then have a look on the ASA's website, because they list all of the investigations that they've carried out and all of the rulings that they've made. So it makes for quite interesting reading and helps you perhaps avoid those same pitfalls yourself. And talking of that, we're now going to get into some practical advice on how you can avoid greenwash. So some top tips here. The first one is the Competition and Markets Authority's Green Claims Code. So I mentioned that when I was talking about UK regulations. These you can have a look at this on the Competition and Market Authority's website. And I think if you can think about this checklist of 6 points when you're writing something or thinking about making a green claim, then it really will guide you into and help you avoid kind of common pitfalls, really. So be truthful and accurate. Well, that one is obvious, and I hope we would all kind of strive to do that. Be clear and unambiguous. So really, it's best to get away from very vague terms like eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, green, sustainable, because they really don't mean that much. And to be honest, if you're whatever you're producing, it's bound to have some sort of environmental impact. So to say it's completely eco-friendly is always a bit it's never going to be accurate, actually, and it doesn't give your reader or your prospect any balancing information so that they can kind of make that decision for themselves. Then number 3, don't omit or hide important information. So as we saw in that HSBC advert, they certainly did not give the full picture about the environmental impact of their activities. They didn't give the reader enough context to make the right decision. Make comparisons fair and meaningful. So if you're making perhaps a statement about your product being more efficient than something, then make sure that what you're comparing it to is fair and like for like, and that you're very specific about that comparison. Then substantiate your claims, provide robust, credible evidence, and it's even better if that can be backed up by an independent third party. And certainly if you are a B2C company and you're in scope of the EU Green Claims Code, then that's something that you're going to have to start to do anyway. And then consider the full impact of your product from creation to disposal. So there was one interesting advertising example which I didn't put in for time, which was an advert for an electric scooter, and it stated that the scooter was environmentally friendly, and the advert was banned because while the scooter was environmentally friendly in operation, so it was better to use that scooter instead of taking the car, for example. Certainly the manufacture of the scooter itself and probably the disposal of the scooter at end of life were things that would be having an environmental impact. So really that company needed to be a bit more specific about what they were talking about when they were talking about being environmentally friendly. And now to drill down into something which we see a lot, which is about absolute claims versus comparative claims. So on the left, you've got, as I said before, green, environmentally friendly, low emission, sustainable. They are making a suggestion that your product has absolutely no environmental impact whatsoever, which is probably untrue. Whereas if you can use comparative claims as the starting points for your for the claims that you're making, then you'll go, that's a great starting point to kind of go some way and then develop it. So is it's lower emissions than, or it's more sustainable than, and then provide those comparisons, provide those statistics, and basically to give as much context as possible, and put yourself in the reader's shoes, put yourself in your customer's shoes, and think, what information do they need for this, so that they can make that informed decision for themselves. And here's some examples. And I realised that the right-hand side, which is the kind of better side in terms of greenwashing, is really horrible. I expect we've got a lot of marketers out here thinking, oh, well, this is just really gross, isn't it? We've got the, you know, start off with kind of a snappy tagline or a snappy title, and now we've got to go into all this detail. And you know, I agree, it's not great, is it, for our copy? But there are ways and means. So, you know, you could perhaps provide a QR code to some extra information, or a web link, just so that people have an easily accessible way of getting the information that they need. And again, you'll see I've used that eco-friendly lighting term as something that to avoid. Instead, say it's 40% more efficient than, and provide evidence too, if you can. Don't say zero emissions fleet, because it doesn't take into account, for example, the manufacturer of the EV, or in fact the emissions that will be emitted when charging the vehicle. Instead, make it clear that you're talking about the zero emissions from the tailpipe while driving. And then net zero, I'll just mention that one again, because obviously it is such a confusing term for people. It can be very misleading. So provide as much information as possible about what you mean by net zero, and what you're going to do to offset residual emissions. And then I realised, what's the time? Yeah, I've probably bored you to death for the past 20 minutes about words and technicalities and minding your big P's and Q's. So I just wanted to lift it slightly and talk about company culture, because actually we can all, authenticity is the new currency. So we are all in a world where increasing scrutiny is perhaps causing us to sugarcoat things, and we're trying to strive for perfection because we're scared of getting things wrong. But actually, people do business with people, and it's very refreshing when you hear from companies that are open to talking about their challenges and admitting their mistakes. The companies that don't fear failure, and those that see marketing as a dialogue with them and their stakeholders, and not just simply a way of kind of getting the megaphone out and glossing over everything. So I just wanted to say that, really, from a personal perspective, I do enjoy kind of interacting with brands that set that kind of culture. And it's okay to be human, and it's okay to admit where you are right now. And that's just a screenshot of a sustainability report that a company called Oatly produced in 2018, because they do that sort of thing particularly well. And this is our own impact report, and I'll just hand over to Jo, actually, so you can talk a little bit more about what we do.
Yes, so for about the last 5 years, Content Comms has produced voluntarily an impact report looking at any, I suppose, conflicts, as could be seen by the outside world, about where we sell our services and where we get revenue from. And we've done this. This is a sector-led initiative. It was something that the creative sector made a commitment to, or certain companies did in the creative sector. And we were one of the first signatories to that, and our report was the output. And actually this report has driven changes in behaviour, both from ourselves, and it's inspired clients to also commit to being more open, more transparent about their own businesses. And, you know, we're a tiny business, we're a tiny service-based business, excuse me, and yet we still make this commitment year on year to truth, openness and transparency. And actually you can see on the screenshot in front of you on the right hand that we've declared where in our previous report for the previous financial year, where we had 0.6% of our revenues during that year from a carbon intensive industry. And that was actually because we work with a FTSE listed business. Somebody who used to work for that business is actually on this webinar. I can see that. And 0.6% of our revenue came from a business that was making concrete products. And the reason that I feel comfortable about that as the leader in this business, and I'm happy to declare that, I'm happy to be open about it, is because actually that company, beyond anything else, was one of the most committed businesses I have ever come across to sustainability and to deepening sustainability. And I feel that our work with them was a force for good, and that actually what they were doing in their business was a force for good in driving decarbonisation and the reduction of raw materials in their business. But that kind of sense of openness and transparency, we think, is something that we encourage our clients really to do. We've just done one of these reports for a client who's actually, again, a Scottish technology business, so they're also listening in today. And so I would urge you all to think about this as a starting point, and start small, and perhaps increase the level of openness and the level of detail that you aim for. So that's kind of probably all I want to say on that one, Esther, I think.
Okay, great. So I also wanted to say that if you are walking the walk on sustainability and you do feel like you're leading the way in your sector, and perhaps that there are certain practices within your sector or current policy that is holding you back from being greener than you could be, then another way you can use your communications is to call things out and start encouraging better questions. So I just wanted to highlight, this is a client of ours called Entrance, who are all about promoting transparency in the energy supply sector. So there's quite a lot of legal greenwashing that goes on in the energy supply sector. You're allowed to kind of claim that your supply is 100% renewable, when in fact, if it's coming from the grid, it's certainly going to have a mixture of fossil fuels in there. And they see their role as it's because it's an area that is relatively not very well known. They see that part of their role is educating the market and empowering customers to differentiate between ethical and less ethical choices. And these are, for example, some blog posts that we've written for them, which explains the issue to consumers, because we're not all there, I think. And if you're in a situation where you have a very strong agenda that could further the cause in terms of greenwashing, and you feel like there are some obstacles that are holding you back in terms of customer awareness, and then that's the way to go. So I'd encourage you to check out Entrance if your kind of 100% renewable claims are something that's worrying you. I would encourage you to get in touch with them and have a chat, because they can help you gain a bit more transparency in that area. So here's a summary then. Greenwashing, as we explained, it's a business risk, and it's becoming riskier as awareness and regulations tighten. Do check the rules in the countries that you operate. Use the Green Claims Code as a guide. Encourage better questions if you want to educate the market, and just think about authenticity as being the new currency, and don't fear failure. It's okay to make mistakes. And here's how we can help you if you're interested in anything that we've spoken about today. Non-judgy strategic comms, hopefully we won't be too judgmental. wherever you are in your journey. If you want to just pick up the phone and have a chat to us, then we'd be really, really happy to help you. We can help you with an anti-greenwash audit of your websites and marketing collateral. So if you think that, if you're now thinking about things that aren't quite right and you'd like a bit of a helping hand, then we'd be happy to look at that. Thought leadership content calls out competitor greenwashing or government policies that aren't quite right. All of those sorts of things we've helped clients do to elevate their profile and accelerate kind of systemic change. And then impact reporting, ESG and impact reporting that tells your story with humanity and honesty and accuracy too. So thank you so much. This is just a link to our anti-greenwash playbook, which Jo mentioned earlier on in the call, and we'd love to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks for listening. Sophie, do we have any questions? I mean, we're very obviously we're not lawyers, so we don't want to kind of get into the realms of maybe some specifics, but we are very, very happy to help answer any sort of general questions or anything that wasn't clear during the course of the presentation. So if anything coming in?
Yep. Yeah, we do have a few questions come through, and thanks, Esther, for a great presentation. Again, it's not too late to send any questions through. Feel free to put them in on the Q&A. We do have a question from Kevin, which I will just slightly synthesize. So essentially his question is around this terminology, for example, powered by 100% renewable energy. And so, as we often know is the case, the wind isn't always blowing, the sun isn't always shining. And so in this kind of scenario, how would you look at tackling that kind of terminology when it comes to the hard and fast claims, and navigating what that kind of language could look like and what it should look like?
Esther, I was going to say, Esther, that is definitely one for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's this is an area in which voices are getting louder and louder. So for a long time, it's been okay to say that your energy supply is 100% renewable, and the truth is, and not many people really think about this, but you may be purchasing a 100% green energy supply, but the truth is, if you're getting it from the grid, then it's going to be a mixture of clean and dirty sources, because the sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing. And I think that there is a bit of a legal loophole which allows companies to do that, but certainly for me it's not an area where people are going to be able to get away with it for too much longer, because regulations are tightening. The greenhouse gas protocol is reviewing the rules around the reporting of green energy, and I think it's better really to get ahead of the pack and start thinking about how you can be a bit more honest about your energy supply, because if you don't do it now, then someone else is going to call you out on it and going to do it for you.
Esther, can I just pick up on one? Interestingly, on our list of attendees today, we've got two chaps who both worked for FTSE listed businesses. Both have been clients. Both of these guys have been responsible for significant energy spends and for the ESG, sustainability and net zero reporting in their businesses. And I'm very, very fortunate to have worked with them both on their PLC's annual reports. I would say that this is certainly something that I would have brought to the attention of, we would have had discussions about this at sort of reporting stage. I think that having sat in on board level conversations about ESG and net zero, there is a real fear amongst senior leaders in businesses who are not well versed on energy and the specifics around some of these topics. And I think that it's the sort of thing that needs to be brought to the attention of senior leaders, because this is absolutely an example of where reputational risk is at stake. Now, I realise that not all businesses are listed, and therefore investors and analysts are not a problem for everybody on this call. But we all have customers, we all have supply chains. The supply chains are getting tougher on us, by the way. We all have stakeholders. and I would say Esther is spot on. We need to be addressing this, making senior leaders aware of these challenges and these questions, and working out with with your sort of comms colleagues how a response is prepared to that and how that's reported on. And I would urge that if there's anybody on this call who is not at that point, I would urge you to think about that now, not later. Any other questions? So
you're on mute, so.
Yep, of course. We do have more questions is what I was trying to say. We've got one from Rich. Thanks for this, Rich. He actually says, how long do we have on Regos, etc., and those kinds of things until they aren't recognized anymore? I know this might be a bit of a tricky question, so I might have to throw this at you, Esther.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know, and I probably will just give it another plug to our client Entrance in that regard. Go to entrance.co.uk, and they will probably be better able to answer your question, because they have that's their kind of role really, is to help companies transition to a more kind of granular reporting of their energy sourcing. But I suppose it's quite a technical question, but we do know that the previous government was reviewing the rules around the marketing of green energy supply products, and that's not yet been kind of picked up again by the new government. But as it is a kind of it's a real hot topic, it's not going to go away. And the greenhouse gas protocol as well, who is there, they have the standard for scope 2 for energy reporting, and they are also reviewing their guidance. I know that, and I don't know when that's kind of set to that piece of work is set to be completed. So probably the short answer is I don't know, but there are certainly people out there who do know.
Great, thank you. We have another question in through from Leticia that asks about how is the best way to go about communicating the hidden impacts of a product in sustainability communication. Maybe that involves your scope 3s and that sort of thing, and looking at the balance between the positive work that's going around and some of the more difficult aspects that come with perhaps manufacturing or something like that.
I think, interestingly, when we produced the first edition of this in 2021, one of the things that we really tried to communicate in here was about communicating, not being frightened of failure and not being frightened of where you're at now. I think it's really important that companies have a sort of a culture of openness about being happy to say where you're at. You know, if you were trying to stop smoking or lose weight, you might say, well, I'm not where I want to be. I'm down to a few ciggies a day, or I've lost a stone, but I've still got 2 to go. It's about the journey. And I can think, I won't start naming names, but you know, I can think of one particular large FTSE business that we work with, who just made the most extraordinary headway on decarbonisation in their energy intensive business. And I always admired what they did so much, because I think that openness around where you're at and where you want to get to and the challenges along the way is a very powerful is a very powerful message. And it enables you really to connect with your peers, because it's also important to show leadership in these areas as well, and so that everybody in your space feels happy to talk about the now and the challenges, and perhaps to share ideas. And again, I would say that that's a thing. And I think most companies have things, Leticia, that they're uncomfortable about. We had a neighbour here in our building who had a very small business printing beautiful quality. She was a designer, but she made beautiful quality material. The substrate was flax. It was linen, but she was extremely concerned about the fact that the wood block print element happened in India. But when I pushed her on what checks she undertook to make sure that those workshops were ethically run, I was really impressed by the answer she gave me. And so we built that into just a few paragraphs of wording on her website. And that meant that it was a difference between Kate talking about ESG and sustainability and ethics and not. And so I think, don't fear the where you're at.
Oh, that's really well said, Joe. Thanks for adding that example in too. We've had a follow-up from Kevin, which is quite useful, and he just said that we should know about the future of Regos early in the new year with the first output from Rima. So that's really useful.
Yes,
thanks.
Well done to Team Entrance. We love the fact that you're listening and that you're there. Thank you.
And then I've actually got kind of a follow-up to some of these questions, and maybe this is one for you, Joe. But looking at one of the common questions I know that we get and lots of organizations get is whose responsibility is it in a business to ensure that greenwash compliance is achieved?
Okay, well, I think it goes right to the top. And I would take no, I don't think there's any. You don't need to elongate the answer, really. One thing I would just like to say is, we did a similar presentation to this yesterday for the Lighting Industries Association, which is made up of manufacturers primarily serving the lighting sector. And one of the things that I'm really noticing as a marketeer of a certain age is that marketing tasks and content, as we now call it used to be called PR, is being pushed further and further down the food chain in businesses. And it's ending up being something that ChatGPT writes in some businesses, which I'm very uncomfortable about for obvious reasons. And it's also something that ends up on the plates of sometimes the youngest, most inexperienced people in a company. And what I would say to you is anybody here who is in a business where content is being produced where there are not checks and balances in place, and you've got young and junior people or possibly using different techniques to produce your marketing content, just be really sure that you have a process in your team to make sure that they understand the responsibility on them for how copy and content is produced, and the impact on the business if they do not play by the rules, the internal kind of rules on the checks and balances and the approvals process. For me, that is absolutely vital, and it only occurred to me yesterday, really, what a tremendously big problem this is going to become, because marketing is not, I'm afraid, seen in the way that it used to be. And we need to remember, all of us, there's a lot of marketeers I can see on this call. We need to remember that we are often the gatekeepers of between right and wrong and between risk and no risk. And that's a much bigger topic than we're here to talk about today, but it's a really important one. So I would urge you to take that away as a sort of go home point.
And I would just extend that to say that anybody who has a customer facing role, so your sales teams, your marketing teams, anyone that's got a kind of touch point with stakeholders, in fact not just customers but stakeholders, should be aware of the tightening scrutiny when it comes to greenwashing, and certainly, if you have a legal team, then you should be including them too.
Yeah, that's really great. Thanks, guys. I am aware that we have more questions, and we would love to stay on and answer you all day, but we are also aware that you guys have given us your time during your lunch break. You're probably snacking on sandwiches and have to get going. So I'll hand back to Esther and Joe for final words, but please do get in touch. We'd love to answer more of your questions.
Well, firstly, just thanks to everybody for letting us take up your lunch hour. I think it shows what a topic it is that people are prepared to give up their sandwiches to listen in. Thank you very much to Esther, who's put all the effort into today in terms of the content, but to Sophie and Sian, who've made it happen. But most of all, thank you to all of you. And just a little reminder that this book is available as an ebook from our website. Just get onto our website. You can find it on our impacts page. It's located all over the site, but we will also send, I think, Sophie and Sian, a follow-up, is that correct, to make sure that everybody has a QR code or a link to download that. And that's really all of the really useful takeaways from today are in there. So thank you so much once again. Happy to take any specific questions via an email, so don't hesitate to send them through. We'd love to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you.